Okay, y'all just got a very small break, right? Do y'all need to stand up for a second? Y'all want to stand up? Let's stand up. Come on. This space in here is like my house of movement. So I'm going to set this down for a second and just use my voice. So let's go ahead. I want y'all to take a big breath. Reach up for me. Big, big, deep breath into your belly. And I want you to hold it. And I want you to exhale and bring those hands down. Bend your knees a little bit. Reach up one more time. Big, big, deep breath. And bring the hands down. Take your left hand up. Reach over. I want you to push into that ceiling on the side. Push into it really big. Are you breathing? I don't hear it. One breath. Exhale. Good. Inhale to the center. Exhale. Other side. And I want you to go again until you're actually breathing naturally. Exhale. Inhale, center. Exhale. Good. Bring your hands to the center and reach up for me. One more time. And I want you to actively reach with your fingers. And I want you to tighten your fists. And I want you to tighten your arms and your belly and your backside and your legs and your toes. Scrunch them all up as tight as you can get. Scrunch your face. And exhale and let it go. Come see y'all. I want to thank you all very much for spending time here. You know, time is such a valuable commodity. And I think we could probably all say we don't think we have enough, right? But we all have the same amount. And as someone that's been in the fitness and wellness industry, actually my entire life, I grew up in the water sports industry, and actually I was born and raised on this lake. And I don't tell a lot of people this, but I'll tell y'all, when I was born, my parents ran this property as Lake Austin Lodges, which is really interesting because my parents gravitated to the water, and then their parents eventually moved to this water's edge. And being raised on this lake, the water for me was recreation for many, many years. It was my way of playing, and of course there weren't a lot of kids that lived out here at that time. It was pretty far out in the country. But it was my way of recreating and playing and spending time with family. And then as I got older, it became a competitive athletic outlet and component for me, of which over time I ended up meeting my husband because of the water and becoming a water sports athlete. And then as my husband and I pursued, I don't even call it a career, it's been actually a lifetime of being in, on, and near the water. And then we realized that we started using the water organically to take people to the water that were either struggling, maybe had a bad day, or a loss, or an illness. Individuals and their families battling cancer, we would do, and still do, retreats on the water. We started a foundation for first responders, and we use the water. Most of our activations are on the water, of getting individuals on the water that have suffered from stress, illness, and loss, PTS. First responder, day in, day out, that's what they do. And so they're constantly around that. And so we've used the water organically for healing and for respite. And at Lake Austin Spa Resort, you probably discovered a bit of that. Actually, I think your most attended activity has been on the water, right? Going out on the water and in the boats. And when you ask people, where are you going this summer? Where are you going on vacation? A lot of people say to the water or to the beach and don't really realize why. But when we think about it, there's something there that is kind of wholesome, right? Kind of healing and nurturing for us. So I do hope that while you've been at Lake Austin Spa Resort, you've enjoyed the water and have a bit of that to take home. But Marilyn and Ellen were sweet enough to ask me to come in and just kind of wrap up your PowerTrip. So with that being said, what has it meant to you? What is the PowerTrip been? Anybody have anything to throw out to me?
It's renewing.
Renewing?
Yeah, finding balance.
Balance, finding balance. That's a tough one too, right?
Self-reflection.
Reflection, yeah, on the water. Love that.
Amazing people.
Yay, amazing people. Yeah, awesome. Connection, yeah. Yeah.
Inspiration.
Inspiration, new friends,
Fellowship.
fellowship. Love that. Love that. Anything else? Those are fantastic.
Sisterhood.
Sisterhood, yeah.
I saw again what it looks like when the whole DNA of one place is the same. Like for here, y'all's DNA was so the same. It was a shared mission, vision, core set of beliefs, and everyone had that and demonstrated that in everything we did, every moment of the day. And that's really what we all want for our kids to experience in our communities, in our district, is that shared DNA.
Wow, that gives me goosies. Yeah, it does. It does. And I do a lot of work in the community with that, because there's that empowerment, and there's an inspiration when everybody's clicking with the same values and the same responsibility and respect level. Yeah.
I saw a demonstration of care. I think care from the construction of the selection of the location, but care to ensure that you arrived safely, that you were greeted warmly, and care in the construction of the program itself, which allowed for you to be a part of a group or alone, and it was okay, either one, but also the facilitation of relationships. So it was all really very tailored to ensure that you felt at home. And it was very meticulously done, well done, and I think each person found their space.
That's awesome. That's beautiful.
Caring.
Caring. Yeah, thank you. That's a huge picture. Wow, I think I could stop right there. Y'all really, I hear the words, but I feel it, and that's huge, and that's really a hard thing to do. And you know, when Marilyn first told me that the title or the name of the retreat, you know, the PowerTrip, and that's, I mean, power is big, and power is so collective. It's, you know, it's beyond our community. It's global. But then when you really start honing in on it, you know, it is our states and our cities and our community, our home, our schools, our homes. But then it's us, right? It's that one little micro cell of us. And that's my hope, is that you can kind of hold on to, if it one thing, that's going to be my challenge and my ask, just that one thing when you leave here that allows you to retain your power, right? And not your power over, not your power on what happens in the big global picture, but what it is for yourself to stay whole, to stay happy, to stay connected. And so in this little bit of time, I wanted to kind of go over a couple things with that, and again, in my hopes that you can just hone in on that one thing, because you've had so much here, right? You've had a lot of information and a lot of opportunity, and sometimes I call it the shotgun effect, right? If there's all this going on, but we just want to grab one little piece of it to try to anchor us as we move on, okay, into that next step. So a little bit about myself. I have a vast background in water sports and in health and fitness and wellness. I came out of the University of Texas master's program with health promotion and exercise physiology and journalism. And oddly enough, I ended up in the spa industry and marketing and sales to begin with, and that kind of all melded together. But my passion has really been in pursuit of the mental aspect of it. And in my personal background, I've done some crazy endurance events and activities through the years. And I always get asked, well, how do you train for all that? Well, anybody can put their body through that training, but it's that mental component that makes it happen, right? It's that mental mindset. And I'm a huge advocate of that mental mindset, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through here. But first of all, I want you to take a look at this.
Jay, get me a Band-Aid, okay? Here, go stir. You like to stir. Okay, let's take a look at it. Let's see if it's okay. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. It's actually not.
Dad?
Yeah.
This goo's on fire.
Oh, no, not so many Dad. Lights and hot and nice and spicy. Yeah, here we go. There we go. Got it. All right.
Hey, Dad.
Oh, good. Can you get a Band-Aid?
No need to say hello. Not one other kid in this neighborhood does chores.
Well, we're not like any other family in the neighborhood.
Right, so why do we live here?
Dishwasher now. Jessica, can you get these plates and put them on the table, please?
Look, Mike's Atletico. Ow!
Oh. Pasta de la crotch.
Is that blood?
No, it's just like...
Blood!
Oh. Clean up on aisle 12. Anybody?
Let me help clean up. What did you?
Are you all right?
Still need help cleaning up, Dad?
No, you mopped it up enough with your back. Oh, disgusting. Where's the Band-Aid?
Dad, it still hurts.
Oh, here, let me... Nora, where's that bandit?
Jake put a bucket on Jessica's head and it stuck. And when they have a free moment, let my parents know that I came by to tell them I got a job in an ad agency today.
Nora. Nora!
Dad, I'm here.
Nora! Nora! Are you all right? You are in over your head, mister. I'm so sorry. I will call. It's just my wife is out of town. Hey.
Can I kill Jake now?
No, you finish washing the car first.
All right. And did anybody leave home from that, right, before you came in here? I think we can all probably relate to some aspect of that. And my point of showing you that is that there's so much out there that we come from, right? When we go back, it's that could just be an example of what happens in the office or what happens at home or what happens with the kids. I can remember my personal example, and it's all about what lens you're looking through, right? But I remember standing in my kitchen one morning with my kiddos, and I homeschooled but took them to a co-op, and so, I was making breakfast, packing lunches, in a t-shirt, hair all over my face, trying to get ready because I was also working, and just total chaos, right? Total chaos I was in. And we have glass like this, and we have a very similar view to this. And my husband's outside in his boxers with a cup of coffee. And the bulldog's like running and bringing him the ball. And he's like stepping back and throwing the ball and sipping his coffee. And the lens I was looking through was that, and I was living that, right? I was in the kitchen with all this going on, and I was like, oh my gosh. And all I did was get madder and madder at him, right? But the point is that he had made a really diligent choice in his morning, and I did too. I made my choice, and I was in the midst of that chaos, and he was out there having his morning moment in his boxers with his coffee, throwing the ball, and it was me just looking out at that picture. So I don't know what you're going home to. It might not be anything like that. You might go, oh my gosh, that is what I'm going home to, but the point being, there were certain things that were totally out of Steve Martin's control. Seems like he's always out of control in a movie, right? But there were certain things that were obviously out of his control. But there were probably a few nuggets within that he was still could have possibly had control over. And possibly he could have had control over what even put him into that moment, right? And that's how I felt that day in my kitchen. When I reflected on it and was, why am I so mad at my husband for this last week? Because I was putting myself in situations that I had control over, but I was still allowing that stress to come into my life. And he was choosing the very opposite, to start his day in a very relaxed way and not letting that stress come over him. So my little nugget of hope for you is to find those little moments that you're able to take that power and retain that power for moments in your day that will help provide you with that health, which is mental, emotional wealth, if you will. And I know we're in a society of crazy connected chaos, right? Steve Martin's was in the kitchen, but even probably as you sit here and your phone's lighting up, or you've got stuff going on your desktop or your computer or your iPad, there's constant things that are coming in that are totally out of our control. But I will ask, and I beg to ask you, of what in all of that, if I'm sitting here and I've got my phone and I've got notes and I'm making choices, I want you to always ask, where are those choices that I'm making? Where do I still have the power for them to maybe turn off a little so that I can preserve a little of me, right? In our house, on Sundays, we have 4 hours of no cell phone time. Everybody puts it in the basket, and that's it. And it's just 4 hours out of the entire week, but it has made a huge difference in our family's really whole mental emotion for a whole week, because it makes us really think and be contemplative about it. So when you go home and that real world stress comes back into play, we really want to try to focus on those little nuggets of what we can control. And in the scientific world, we call that resilience. And what I was really part of at the University of Texas was a huge study that, oddly enough, was funded with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it was all around resilience. And granted, that was many, many years ago. That's still so resounding. And when I do studies and when I work with grants for philanthropic purposes, so much of it is still back to that root word of resilience. And when I was thinking about just coming in quickly and talking to y'all and about the PowerTrip, there's so much power in resilience, right? And how we manage what we can control, because there's so much in this day and age. It is way beyond what we can control in a global picture, in a organizational picture, and even in sometimes in our family pictures. We know that when it comes down to it, every 80 seconds, a female in the United States dies from some type of heart issue, some type of cardiovascular issue. There's so much that genetically we're not able to do about that without interventions, but there is so much that we personally can do about that with our own power and our own intervention. Our body has such stress responses that is fundamentally innate and part of us, with increased cortisol, with heart rate, blood pressure, insomnia. Anybody in here sleep like a baby every single night? No. Did anybody do it while you're here? Anybody sleep a little bit better than usual? Yes, I love to hear that. That's awesome. Depression and anxiety. I mean, it's a huge stress response. Heart rate variable is probably a word you hear a little bit more nowadays. And all of that tells us, when we study heart rate variance, is that the higher rate of heart rate variance that we have as individuals, the more enabled we are to manage stress. And heart rate variance is how much our heart rate goes up and down during the day. So those of you that are really into science and data, there's some great apps. Even iPhone has their health app. You can tap into this. But knowing that if we're able to manage our heart rate and teach our heart rate to go up when we need it to go up, right, during times of performance, during times of endeavor, and also when we need it to come down. So the more peaks and valleys we're able to produce in our heart rate, scientifically tells us that we have a better stress response in our system. So what I'm concerned about is that you can find your peak and you can find your valley. Well, I can train you physically to find your peak, right? That's our movement and our fitness and our activity. So that's a conversation. But then the valley, how do I train my heart rate to calm down? And again, that's that resilience. And that's that response to stress. So that's a whole different conversation. But with that being said, the goal is to know how to bring the heart rate down, to manage that. So when we talk about that, we talk about our relaxation response. And when we are able to relax, which I hope you have found some relaxation while you've been here, when we're able to relax, dopamine, that good hormone in our blood that helps us to relax, it makes us happy, our heart rate goes down, blood pressure goes down, that whole state of relaxation goes down. What I love about relaxation is that it does increase creativity, right? It helps us unstagnate. I've had people who go out and paddle, like, oh my gosh, I had so many great ideas when I was paddling. What's that all about? And then a state of connection goes up. So, I mean, obviously, Steve Martin's state of connection was a little off the charts, right? His cortisol was up, his stress response was up, highly disconnected. But if you just kind of think, of my husband in the yard, right? Not in his boxer, you don't think about that. But my husband in the yard, and he's so connected. He was connected to himself. He was connected to what was in his surroundings, to the dog, to the moment. So it's a very big difference in that state of connection. And again, what I love about the creativity. So connected, right? Connected to your environment, connected to things that are maybe a higher power, to nature. I talked a little bit a minute ago about water. What I'm going to ask us to do really quick is to take a moment to connect and to kind of give this a try. So let me turn on my little boom box. And if you'd like to go ahead, if you want to back up as much as you can between your tables for a second and just kind of put your hands maybe on your thighs. And maybe softly close your eyes. If you don't want to close your eyes, that's not a problem. And I'd like you to breathe through your nose. I'm going to change this over to the speaker, hopefully. to breathe through your nose. There we go. To soften your face. To relax your shoulders. To relax your feet. To relax your forehead. And maybe for the first time today, you think about where you're sitting. You're connected to your chair. You're connected to the space around you. And maybe in your mind's eye, if you were out on the lake during any time during your stay, you can see the hills. You can feel those hills. You can feel that flow of the water. And practicing that connectivity, I want you to start to feel your breath. And if it helps, maybe you can put your left hand on your belly. And every time you inhale, I'd like you to feel your hand rise. And when you exhale, your belly button softly pulls to your spine, not forcefully, but in a very relaxed way. And then just continue that pattern, letting your belly slowly rise and slowly fall. Maybe the shoulders soften even a little more. And I'd like you to take 3 more breaths. And this time, match the inhale with the exhale. Maybe it's a 2 or 3 count inhale, 2 or 3 count exhale. And continue that pattern, maybe for 2 more breaths. And let's go one last breath. And then bring your shoulders up towards your ears. Take a big deep breath for me. And as you exhale, bring your shoulders down. And slowly open your eyes. And be aware of your surroundings. And be aware of where you're at in your space. You. Just you, right? You've come through a lot this week. Things bigger, brighter, better. But now it's you in this moment, in this place, in this time. Connected. And that was 3.5 minutes of just being you and just connecting. So my challenge to you is 3.5 minutes can go a long ways, right? It can be a way you can start your day. It can be a way you can take a break in the middle of the day, finish your day, or maybe something to come back to when that stress response goes off the charts. Just stop or just find a quiet space. I have done it sitting on the toilet, right? I mean, I have found my space when I needed to get away. Nobody's ever going to deny me the fact of going to the restroom, right? And just finding my space and coming out truly a different person, or just walking away, finding your space and coming out a different person. So that little skill and drill is a way of connectivity, and one that, right, wrong, or different, may not work for you, may work for you, one you can personalize. Everything's meant to be personalized. But something that you can just reground and reconnect with. You are your own best advocate. You have the power. You have your power, right? There is nobody that can take that away from you unless you give it to them. So in times of craziness and of stress and high voltage situations, know what your response, your go-to is, and what your toolbox is, right? Some people it's a walk, some people it's a run, some people it's a sit, it's a breath meditation. Some people it's a great song, but know what your go-to is, what your response is. Be your own best advocate. And I don't want to really dwell on this too much, but the staying whole for others, staying whole for yourself is really important. When we are whole for others, whether it's our families or our organizations, it's a whole different ballgame. And one of my probably favorite mantras, every year I have a new mantra, my favorite mantra this year is to be contagious, right? Because whatever you give off is highly contagious. Trying to teach my 16-year-old son that, not working out so well, but he's highly contagious, I will tell you that. Stress response goes up every time, but I have my toolbox and I know what to do. And I will tell you, anybody have a teenager? Movement helps bring that stress response down. When my son and I are in a high voltage situation, we have a mutual agreement that we don't sit still or stand still with it, we walk. So he'll go, we need to walk. And I'll say, we need to walk, and it's a mutual agreement. And it's so amazing how that calms the situation down and helps us literally move through it. It's been one of our saving graces. So when we're trying to stay whole for others, certainly knowing if our cups are half full or half empty is a perception, right? How we perceive life. And that's a big part of the resilience of, sorry y'all, I'm trying to turn that around, of knowing how we view things. So with resilience, our ability to adjust or to recover or adjust easily to change, right? At the University of Texas, we just call it bouncing back. How do you bounce back? How do you keep your power that when something comes at you that's beyond your control, how do you bounce back and move through that? I'm a pretty visual person, so I like to be able to have things to reflect on, to look back on. So I'm going to hand these out really quick. So at the very top of this, and I'll let you reflect on these later. I was going to break you up into groups, but in the honor of time, we won't do that. And maybe this is one of your opportunities to kind of be with yourself a little bit after this retreat. But at the top, the areas of my life I have no control, which, y'all, that's one small line. I'm sure, journal, right? We have so much in our lives right now that we don't have the power over. But what I want to encourage you to do is, what are those areas that you do have the power over, right? If you need to reflect on a stressful situation and pluck out what was out of your control and what was in your control with that. But I highly recommend that the more you're able to do that when stress comes upon you or situations come upon you, where do I not have the control, the power? Where do I have the power and the control in this situation? So transforming stress, those positive reactions and emotions really is what transforming stress is. And that first line right here of the positive reactions, emotions, and feelings you had while being at this retreat, y'all shared some amazing emotions, reactions, and responses to this retreat with me when we first started. And I highly encourage you to write down some of those words that we were hearing here as a group. And then what is your go-to? What is your go-to when you have stress in your life right now? Is it a walk? Is it a meditation? Is it push pause? What is your go-to? So being able to identify that is a lot of power, because that's your toolbox. That's your toolbox to take home with you. What do I identify with that is in my power as my stress response? So if you don't already know that, I encourage you to take a little time to find 1, 2, maybe 3 things. Maybe it was like, oh my gosh, that little breathing meditation, that was sweet. That could be a great stress response for me. Hiding in the bathroom, whatever that might work. Whatever it is that might work. Identify. Being able to identify is powerful. And you can think about it, but once you identify it, you own it. So that ownership of it is a huge aspect of it. Knowing when you need to draw your boundaries. I'm not going to dive into that too much, but the reason that's on there is because I've had a couple of conversations with folks this week about boundaries. So where do you need to draw your boundaries so that you don't step off the stress cliff, as you might think about it? And then how do you stay whole and how do you refill? All of these are about transforming stress in your life and knowing that power and that control. All right. So when we talk about the toolbox of transforming stress, it's a personal toolbox, but it's also really a big part of it is identifying so that you have that go-to. So it's not chaos. It's very clear to you on what you identify with in transforming stress. Taking responsibility. Well, that makes me really think of my 16-year-old. I got a phone call from him this morning. You forgot to give me the keys. You forgot to give me the code. You forgot to give me da-da-da-da-da, right? You. Taking responsibility, so many times we give responsibility to others by just simple words that we choose to use. One of my big ones is I can and I can't, right? I can't do this. Well, I've immediately given somebody else all my power when I say I can't. And it's funny because I have families in my community that use that word. And in our little community, it's 50 push-ups is what we say. Oh, 50 push-ups. But now I have kids who tell their parents that, oh, Mom, that's 50 push-ups. She said I can't. But it becomes very deliberate, right? In how casually we use the word I can't versus choice or ability or preference or a decision, right? Oh, I can't go walking right now. Well, yeah, I can, but I'm making a decision. So it really kind of makes me take power and control back over my decision and my destiny. Empowering interpretations. How do we interpret things? How do we interpret things that are out of our control? Is there a way to interpret it more positively? Is there a way to interpret it back to our ownership? I didn't get my bag of groceries. I got 4 bags and the 5th bag's gone. Well, my gosh, my stress level could go super high on that. Or I can reinterpret that. Okay, I'll get the opportunity to go sit in my car and visit with my son on the way up there, and I can reinterpret that. So being conscious of how we interpret situations. Another interpretation, which was one of my favorites, and it has a really long story to it, and I'm very short on time, but have to versus get to. I have to go to that retreat. Or, I have to go to the workshop. Or I have to go get my car fixed. Or I get to. Gosh, I have a car. I get to go get my car fixed. I was on a 100-mile bike ride one time, and I was having a pity party. I was like 55 miles out, and I had to come 45 miles back, and it was hot, and it was miserable. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. I have to do this. I was like, look, I get to do this. This is beautiful. It's gorgeous. I have the ability. I have the time. I get to. And can I tell you, the 45 miles whisked by as opposed to the 55 that I had to and the 45 that I got to was a huge difference. So really empowering in how you interpret things. And meaningful connections, I'll kind of wrap it up on this one. And you guys have had some amazing connections here. I know you've really connected with some amazing people. You've connected with nature outside. And I hope that you have really connected with yourself. And when we have your takeaway on what this meant to you, what the power was in this workshop to you. And on the back of this piece of paper is an anchor. And I have a friend who has a nonprofit, and it's called The Anchor, and it's actually for teens, teen suicide prevention. And I kind of stole her anchor part because I'm such a water girl. But that anchor represents what anchors you, right? What's important to you. And every year, instead of New Year's resolutions, I just pick one word. And that one word is my anchor throughout the year. And actually, last year, the word was not, it was ironically enough, but my word was anchor. I mean, is this decision going to anchor me to my values or my morals or my beliefs? Is this anchoring me so I'm not chaotic? Is this decision anchoring me? So I put an anchor on the back of your piece of paper, and I really want to give you 30 seconds to think about. You may not go on the paper yet, but 30 seconds to think about what is your word, your mantra, your sentence that you will promise me at least for 30 days to use as your anchor. And you may resolve that, oh yeah, that's not quite it, I need to tweak it. Or maybe at the end of 30 days, you know what, I'm ready. I'm ready to drop another anchor. But I give you just a really quick 30 because if I don't do it, you may not do it. To really think about your anchor. So go ahead, 30 seconds, go. So 30 seconds I know is just a blink. And if you really want to spend a little more time with that, I encourage you to do so. But it's a transfer of power. So I hope that as you move on and you enjoy all the goodness that this retreat has given you, you will keep your anchor You will grow yourself. You will stay highly resilient. And as we say at Lake Austin Spa Resort, you will find and keep your water. And our water is what is our anchor here. And we talk about blue mind science and what being in, on, and near the water does for us mentally and emotionally. And finding that anchor in that space, that meditation, that mindfulness, the movement, whatever it is to you that becomes your anchor or your word or your mantra, we wish you that. We wish you that water. And on behalf of Lake Austin Spa Resort, Marilyn and Ellen and the whole team, we so appreciate what y'all have done and this amazing group of women. And it's been just our treasure to host you. And we wish you water. Have a great trip home, y'all.